In a heart-wrenching saga of shattered expectations and unforeseen redemption, my own mother, once revered for her unyielding commitment to tradition and an unwavering standard of perfection, condemned my adopted son as not real family, banishing him from her pristine world. A poignant and tumultuous journey unfolds as the very fabric of cherished family ideals unravels in the wake of cold dismissals and subsequent isolation, forcing a confrontation between the immutable pain of past rejections and the tentative promise of forgiveness, as the echoes of lost love resonate through every broken memory and every desperate plea for a second chance, challenging the very essence of belonging, healing, and redefining kinship boundaries in a world where redemption emerges from ruins of past arrogance. My entire life has been defined by choices that split families apart and mended them in unexpected ways, and nothing could have prepared me for the day my own mother shattered the only sanctuary I'd ever known. I still remember the crisp autumn air that day as I walked into her pristine, overly decorated living room, a room that always exuded the perfection of a picture postcard, and how I braced myself for the storm that was about to break loose. My heart pounded in my chest as I recalled the harsh words she'd spewed months earlier. I wasn't allowed to bring my adopted son Jamie to her house because he wasn't real family. I had heard those words countless times in my mind since the day I had introduced him to my family as the little boy who had transformed my life. I had never imagined that the person who had once cradled me in her arms as a child could now so casually cast aside a part of me. From the moment I welcomed Jamie into my life, I vowed to protect him from every snide remark and every dismissive glance, determined that his tender heart would never know the sting of rejection. Jamie was a beacon of pure love and unbridled enthusiasm, a boy with sparkling eyes and a resilient spirit that defied every odd and rumor. He had been a gift, sent into my life during a season of despair, and I had clung to the hope that unconditional love was more than just a fairy tale. Yet my mother, a woman who prided herself on tradition and the sanctity of bloodlines, dismissed him as an anomaly, a blemish on her perfect legacy. I remember how her tone had hardened as she declared, "He's not real family," words that cut deeper than any knife and left an indelible scar on my soul. For years, the rift between us festered like an unhealed wound. I built a new life with Jamie at the center, a mosaic of small joys and hard-fought victories that contrasted painfully with the cold rigidity of my mother's expectations. Every family gathering became a battleground of silent stares and unspoken resentments, and the air would thicken with tension every time I thought of trying to bridge that gap. I began to realize that my mother's world was one of exclusive circles and narrow definitions of love, a world where the messy, unpredictable reality of adoption had no place. As Jamie grew older, his innate warmth and intelligence slowly began to illuminate corners of my existence that I had long thought lost, and I found solace in the fact that he was the living proof that family wasn't defined by blood but by the bonds we chose to nurture. Then came the day when the universe seemed to exact its own strange form of poetic justice. Rumors, whispers carried on the wind by those who had witnessed my mother's unyielding cruelty began to spread like wildfire. People who once fawned over her perfect image started to see through the facade, and soon, one by one, those who had clung to her legacy abandoned her. In the wake of this mass exodus, my mother's world crumbled, and the same haughty woman who had once ridiculed Jamie now found herself utterly alone. I received a call that afternoon, a trembling, desperate plea from her, begging to see Jamie, to hold on to a semblance of the family she had so carelessly discarded. The call was laden with contrition and a hint of panic, as if she suddenly understood that the cost of her prejudice was far greater than she had ever imagined. I sat in silence for what felt like hours, listening to her halting words, trying to decipher whether her regret was genuine or merely the self-preservation of a dying social empire. Every fiber of my being rebelled at the thought of allowing her back into our lives, of exposing Jamie to the toxic remnants of a love that had once been so blindingly selfish. I remembered the countless nights spent consoling him after family. Dinners had turned into battlegrounds. The whispered promises I made to him that he would never have to endure the venom of rejection that had so long poisoned my own heart. And yet here she was, imploring for a second chance, her voice fragile and quivering, as if the years of isolation had finally eroded the barriers of pride she had so long clung to. In that moment, I was torn between the primal urge to protect my son at all costs and a part of me that longed for reconciliation. A reconciliation that could not erase the past, but might, perhaps, allow for healing in the future. The memory of her dismissive sneer haunted me, but so did the possibility that people could change. I recalled the countless times I had struggled to define what family meant, and I knew that while blood might be thicker than water, the ties of love were woven from threads of shared struggle, sacrifice, and mutual acceptance. I had spent years curating a haven where Jamie could flourish without the taint of prejudice, and now that delicate sanctuary was under threat of being infiltrated by the very bitterness I had fought so hard to escape. I spent a restless night grappling with these conflicting emotions. Every ticking second in the silence of the night magnified the gravity of the decision I was forced to make. The prospect of reintroducing my mother into Jamie's life was like stepping onto a minefield of memories and unresolved pain. I revisited every conversation, every dismissive remark, every tear shed in the quiet aftermath of her cruelty, and I wondered if forgiveness could ever be enough to mend the fractures that had long divided us. At dawn, as the pale light seeped through the curtains and a new day beckoned, I made a decision that was as painful as it was inevitable. I would not allow my mother back into our world, at least not until she could prove that her remorse was more than just a reaction to isolation. When I finally met her for what might have been our last conversation, the air was heavy with unspoken accusations and tentative hope. She pleaded, her eyes red-rimmed and vulnerable, for the chance to see Jamie, to experience the love that she had spurned for so long. I listened, my heart a tumult of anger, sorrow, and a cautious willingness to believe that perhaps redemption was possible even for those who had inflicted deep wounds. I told her that Jamie's well-being was my only measure of her worth, and that if she truly wished to reclaim any part of our family, she would have to earn his trust and prove that the transformation in her heart was genuine. I warned her that forgiveness was not a given, and that love, real love, required consistent, respectful actions rather than hollow words. In the weeks that followed, my mother embarked on a slow, painful journey of atonement. She reached out to those she had wronged, not with the arrogance of her former self, but with the humility of a person who had finally come to understand the true cost of her prejudice. I watched from a distance as she struggled to rebuild bridges that had long been burned, each tentative step a testament to the possibility of change. Jamie, with the innate wisdom of a child who had seen too much, observed her with a cautious curiosity. I could see the seeds of forgiveness beginning to sprout within him, fragile and tentative, as he allowed his heart to consider the possibility that the woman who had once rejected him might now be capable of love. Yet even as I observed these slow transformations, I remained vigilant. I knew that the path to true reconciliation was fraught with setbacks, and that old wounds took time to heal. My mother's journey was far from complete, and every day presented a new challenge in discerning whether her efforts were sincere or simply a bid for comfort in the wake of isolation. I resolved that until Jamie could decide for himself whether to welcome her presence, our family circle would remain guarded, a protective cocoon woven from the threads of hard-earned love and the scars of past betrayal. In the quiet moments before sleep, I would often reflect on how life had a peculiar way of teaching us that family is not always defined by blood, but by the capacity to forgive, to learn, and to grow together, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Now, as I sit here watching Jamie play in the fading light of an early evening, his laughter echoing like a promise of hope, I can't help but marvel at the unpredictable course of our lives. My mother's desperate plea had forced me to confront the very essence of what it means to be a family, a mosaic of imperfections, choices, and the courage to love unconditionally despite the odds. I have come to realize that while the past may forever cast its long shadow, the future remains ours to shape with every act of compassion and understanding. And so, with guarded optimism and a heart still tender from old wounds, I continue on this unpredictable journey, ever mindful that even the deepest scars can one day give way to the possibility of redemption, if only we have the courage to embrace the uncertain light of forgiveness.